Hello and welcome to the Creative Consciousness Radio Show on Blog Talk Radio. We are your hosts, Sam and Cabrini Greco, coming to you live from beautiful planet Earth. Throughout our conversation, we will be covering topics such as spirituality, global consciousness, metaphysics, and where you think we're truly headed. We have a great show to share with you today, so bookmark us and receive reminders. And you can visit our website at alltruenatural.com. All right, welcome to our show this evening, Creative Consciousness Radio Show here on Blog Talk Radio. We have our good friend Adeeb Shabazz, whom we met in 2010. This is going to be a really powerful show this evening. I'm really eager to speak with him again. It was so great to meet him the first time. Please welcome our guest. Adeeb Shabazz is a metaphysical minister and author and serves as a publisher with Proven Publishing, LLC, Supreme Design Publishing, LLC, and Hip Hop U Multimedia Magazine. He's written the critically acclaimed spiritual self-development book, What If God Were One of Us? He's a frequent lecturer on the subject of metaphysics, spirituality, and self-development. Adeeb Shabazz, can you hear me? And welcome to the show.
I can hear you, Sam, and welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much for the warm welcome.
That's amazing. You know, as we talk, I really want to get into part of the hip hop aspect of the spiritual aspect of hip hop. I think there's a very distinct connection between true hip hop and spirituality. But yeah, can you tell us a little bit? Like here it says metaphysical minister. How do you define that for yourself? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and some of these publishings that you do?
Absolutely. I'd be glad to. As far as being a metaphysical minister, I'm not a person who's into religion, so to speak. So I always make that very clear. People hear minister and they think, oh, are you a Christian reverend or an Islamic minister or something like that? And it's nothing of the sort. Basically, my job as a metaphysical minister is to explain the nuances of science, life, and even scriptures from the various religions and how they apply to you in practical application in your everyday life. And that ties in for me in many ways. Speaking of hip-hop, since you mentioned that first, I'll kick off with that and saying that, as I was explaining to my son today, hip-hop has a history that goes back to 1973. And for myself personally, goes back to the mid to late 70s when I first became aware of it. And hip-hop was a very spiritual experience for me. Music is spiritual for many people, first of all. So nothing odd about that. But when it comes down to hip-hop, a lot of people don't think of the spiritual side of it or the divine energy in it. But there's a lot of divine energy in hip-hop. And there was a lot of divine energy moving through. You'd be surprised how many people amongst the pioneers that I was blessed to be able to interview that told me of their spiritual journey in hip-hop, starting with Curtis Blow, who took me all the way back to 1972 in his journey in hip-hop. And he was the first millionaire in hip-hop. You have, for myself, I received my first direction in the 5% Nation or the 5 Percenters in the early 80s. And for me, hip-hop helped enhance the teachings that I got, which led me to understand that I should not be searching for God outside of myself, but looking within.
That's amazing, Adeeb. I know hip-hop also touched my life because I started in the 80s. I started pop locking, really hardcore. And I just got back into it in the last 3-4 years. And I can tell you it's a very spiritual experience. Once you know the certain foundations of the dance itself, there's an amazing community out there of pop lockers out in the world that I'm involved with, even on Facebook, and just by knowing people physically also, it still does exist. And I think there's two lines going on. There's a truth. There's a movement of truth in hip hop, and then there's a movement of untruth in hip hop. Yeah, and so even today is there's this discussion about hip hop amongst some of the poppers, not all of them, regarding their spirituality with the dance aspect of hip hop. Can you tell us about the Hip Hop U multimedia magazine?
Absolutely. Well, Hip Hop U multimedia magazine was started by myself and some very treasured associates of mine. Ambrose Reed Horton, who's not with us any longer in the magazine, but is still a good brother with us. You have Misa Julian, who is a fantastic graphic artist and is the head of our graphic arts department, as well as many other things. She wears many hats. And we have Sparkle Cobb. And Sparkle Cobb, again, wears many hats. She started out as our audio-visual director and, has moved up to about like unofficial VP status by now. As we straighten out our corporate side, this is probably where she's going to be sitting at. But we have a great core of people. We've got True Father-in-Law, who's, been a very instrumental part of the magazine as well. And we have other people who work with us from time to time. We have Earth Say Love. We had the contributions from the great photographer Adeeb Shabazz. There's just so many. I don't want to leave anybody out. But it was started in December of 2013 when we put out our January issue, and we were publishing monthly at the time. We came out with 6 very strong monthly magazines, and they were received very well. We went on a bit of a hiatus because we're switching our platform, and we're coming back with something very fresh and new for 2015. But we were able to interview so many great people in our first year, and that ranges from Pharoah Monch to Curtis Blow, Poor Righteous Teachers. We interviewed so many of the pioneers, MC Light, The Brat, just a host of pioneers in hip-hop. I mean, the list goes on. I don't really have a list in front of me. I have to think of these as they go along. But we were able to actually interview a great deal of pioneers in hip-hop. The real Rick Ross also, who was not a pioneer in hip-hop, but was famous in the Iran-Contra scandal as a drug dealer, who has now been rehabilitated, served his time, and had his name stolen while he was in prison by the rapper we know as Rick Ross or Rose.
Oh, wow.
So, there's a long story to that. But we like to tell a story that's not popular in the mainstream media, that's not popularly being told. And that includes dancing, by the way, which is one of the pillars, just the pop lock-in and break-in. It's one of the 5 pillars of hip-hop. And a lot of people don't know about pillars of hip-hop. They don't know there's more than just music or rapping. Of course, you have DJing and production, turntablism. But beyond that, of course, everybody knows about the MCing. But, there's also breaking, in which you're involved in. And I'm glad to hear that, very glad to hear that, because a lot of people just are not aware of that part of the culture. They're not aware of it. There's also, you talked about visuals, graffiti. I mean, graffiti art is some beautiful stuff. It's not the agent of destruction that a lot of people look at it as. but it's something very beautiful and a very expressive form of art, which is very alive today in America, but also very widespread across the world, especially in Europe. And of course we have that element of knowledge, that element of consciousness, and that's always been a part of hip hop, that consciousness. And that started out with Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. Started out with a lot of the pioneers, Kool Herc. Zulu Nation, which has been around since the beginning, always made sure that there was consciousness in hip hop. And you talked about those two threads, so to speak, of hip hop. One which has a great element of truth, and I like to keep it oneness. Keep it in the spirit of oneness. I don't think that there's falsehood per se going on. It's just that when you leave out parts and elements of hip hop, you receive a very skewed view, and that's what most of the people in the world today are receiving, is a very skewed view, especially in America. They're not really seeing the wholeness of hip hop. And that's what creates that very skewed view, which looks like a false view, but it's kind of like looking at an elephant really close up and wondering what you're looking at and thinking that you're seeing, parched earth or something, and not really seeing that the elephant is really there.
Well, I truly think it's a gift from the divine. There's moments in human history where literally, there's divine renaissance happens, and I think hip-hop was an expression of this. I think, a lot of different music genres is it also like, rock, jazz, and I think hip-hop goes right up there in a conscious evolution. Once hip-hop came, for me, we went up a notch in our conscious evolution, and it did change the world in the way, for me, in the way I think, rock and roll did. I think it made a big change in the world in a positive way. And
there's no doubt about that. It definitely made a huge change, just like, as you said, jazz did, as rock and roll did. It was, those things were revolutionary. Jazz was revolutionary. Rock and roll was revolutionary. And now hip-hop is, as things progress, is a fusion of many of those things. You got to recognize things like A Tribe Called Quest. That's one name that stands out to me as somebody who brings out the jazz in hip-hop. You have Run DMC, and their fusion of rock and roll into hip hop.
It blew me away when I first heard Run DMC back in the day with a rock and roll riff in the background, with Aerosmith, and it blew my mind in a good way. And therefore, for me, that's my mark. Also, is how my mind was blown as far, as well as my heart, how it touched my heart. These are indications to me personally that it was from the divine, period.
And there's no doubt about that in my mind, that it is definitely divine. Hip-hop, like I said, really sparked something in me. I was loving it before I knew that anything was divine about it. But then, like I said, in the 80s, when I came across the 5% Nation, and the 5%ers were enlightening me to a different way of thinking. Like I said, no looking for God outside. God is right in front of you. God is you. And I'm wondering, well, what are you talking about? But then as I heard, and I got to give some shout-outs to those who really led the way, the world-famous Supreme Team show on the radio in the early 80s, as well as DJ Africa Islam, who was part of the Zulu Nation. And I would hear their mixes, and they always infused their mixes with knowledge, with various speakers. And I started hearing the same type of knowledge that I was hearing in the streets, and it all came together for me. So when I went back to who would be my, as we call my enlightener, I understood a bit more, and I wanted to know more. But that spark came from music that brought me back to it, that allowed me to say, well, look, teach me what this is all about.
Yeah, that's beautiful stuff. We all have our stories with it, and I really appreciate you sharing this with us today. I love how hip-hop affects people in positive ways. I know the dance, the pop locking and breaking, b-boying is one of the OGs in LA claimed it as the peacemaker, and it blew my mind because it's true. That's back then, obviously we know the story, how it happened, how it unfolded in the 80s when the gangs were at each other's necks, and they took on dancing and they battled through dance, and it became a peacemaker dance, where the energy was so powerful it got people, expressing themselves that way instead of physically hurting themselves with each other.
Right, right, and that same story is happening on the East Coast with the Zulu Nation in 1973 and 1974, when Africa Bambaataa, who was a gang warlord at the time in 1973, had a transformation, had a spiritual transformation that allowed him to see that he needs to be making peace and not war. Besides being a gang warlord, a lot of people don't realize that, gangs are not full of people who are just evil and want to hurt people. And this was a young man who really needed some family structure that he did not have in his own house, in his own life, and really wanted to gather that, in his life, and he sought that through a gang. Gangs were families. They were families of young people who may not have conducted themselves inside the parameters of social mores and law all the time, but they had their own social mores. And he was a very intelligent person as well. He's a very intelligent young student. We're talking about 14 years old. So at around the age of 13 or 14, he won an essay contest and won a trip to South Africa. So he went to South Africa, came back, and really was enthused by what he learned about Zulu culture and brought that back and took many of the black spades that he was warlord in and took them into something he formed called the Zulu Nation, the Universal Zulu Nation. So the Universal Zulu Nation started then in 1973, I believe. I'm not a spokesman for them, so forgive me if I'm off by a year, but I believe it was 1973, and then began to incorporate elements of hip-hop in 1974. So there were many pioneers. We interviewed one of them through Earth Say Love, one of our associate writers, Queen Lisa Lee, who was part of the Black Spades, who came along with him to the Zulu Nation when she was about 12 years old, and is one of the first, if not the first, female rapper that was around. So we were very pleased to be able to include her in one of our first episodes. Our first issues, of Hip Hop U. But we have a lot of great history in terms of that type of spiritual knowledge that was laid down at that time, and he taught many elements of just social equality and righteousness amongst people to stop them from warring against each other and start realizing that we need to be brothers.
It's very beautiful. The whole story with the Zulu Nation is very beautiful, how it unfolded. I know from my studies, the Zulu people themselves have an extensive knowledge of human history. This type of knowledge of human history, it will bring about the wisdom of preaching peace, the wisdom of practicing peace. And it does not surprise me that Africa Bambaataa came back, as a changed human being.
Absolutely. He said it was very life-changing for him. And, the evidence is in the fact that the Zulu Nation is still around today and still attracting hip-hop artists and rappers and so forth today. Latest big joining that I heard was Lil Wayne joining the Zulu Nation. So still being a very powerful force in hip-hop. And I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you want to say about Hip Hop U Multimedia Magazine, or anything else you want to add regarding the hip hop spirit?
Well, we got a lot coming forward. We still have the Poor Righteous Teachers interview coming out that has not been actually published yet. We still got the interview by Curtis Blow coming out. So those who want to know hip-hop history, and the elements, we really are looking to get to speaking about dance, covering, pioneers like Crazy Legs and Shabba-Doo and, all the great breakers and pop lockers that we still have with us. We definitely want to go ahead and cover those elements as well. We've got a lot of stuff coming up, so if the listeners want to actually be involved, we'll be updating everything this month and coming back strong by the end of the month. So keep in tune to www.hiphopu.me. It's hiphopu.me, and it's the letter U. So it's hip-hop, the letter U.me, and we'll be having a brand new site with a lot of great new features, a lot of interaction. It's going to be very powerful, and we want to hear from each and every one of you because it's you who's going to make it possible. We're just leading the way, kind of as a way shower, but we want the hip-hop community to be involved in this. And as you said, in those two different ways that things are happening, we want to make sure that that holistic view that includes the elements is available to people so that they know what's going on and how it ties together. And we definitely want to encourage that. So stay tuned. And also, we keep things updated on Facebook. So keep just type in hip-hop, the letter U, Multimedia Magazine, and you'll be able to find us on Facebook and keep in tune with us, as well as on Twitter, Hip Hop U Mag.
So there you have it, Hip Hop U Multimedia Magazine. I got them on Facebook as well, folks. So go for it. I want to change it up a little bit here and talk about your book. I think we were talking about it last time we met. I'm not sure if you had finished it or if it was being written at the time. But can you tell us a little bit about your book that's called What If God Were One of Us?
Absolutely. Now, the book was definitely finished. I published the first edition of that book in 2006, and the second edition came out in late 2009. So both were out at the time where we met. We also had a show on called the What If God Were One of Us show, which I hope to get back to very soon, but that ran for a few years. And it's about discovering or uncovering the divinity within yourself. And no matter whether you come from an atheist background, a Christian, Muslim, Hebrew background, agnostic, it doesn't matter, because we're coming straight from a position of universal knowledge. We've got examples in the Bible, in the Quran, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the writings of Buddha. We've got stuff that we cover in terms of just pure scientific knowledge to come from every angle, not only to show different people how to reach their divinity, which is important, but also to realize how connected that we are despite our labels. We might wear the label Christian. We might wear the label Muslim. We might wear the label 5%er. We might wear the label Hindu, and we think that we're different, but we're really not different in that respect. Each message lets us know that we're looking in the wrong place if we're looking outside of ourselves for our divinity. Divinity starts within. Divine energy is flowing through each and every one of us. And once we realize that, the fear dissipates within us. Because fear comes from separation. And separation from what? Separation from your source. Everything alive comes from one source. As we begin to think that we're not connected to that source, or that source is some type of entity that will punish us when we're not doing right and reward us when we please it, then we've entered into a fear zone. So the key is to get us out of that fear zone and back into the knowledge of ourselves.
I love how you put all the different religions and philosophies that are universal, because all of them, tell you to go within. The bottom line is it's within.
It is.
And you don't even have to close your eyes to realize. Because if you can see yourself creating anything, the creator's within us, and it's nothing new for us to hear. I'm just confirming what you're saying. Because I recognize it as well. And yeah, there's truth to that. I'm happy. What do you think of? I'm happy that I was just going to say I'm happy that a lot of people from the last time we spoke, last time we were together, Adeeb, in 2010. I can say in my experience that a lot of people have woken up. There's this dialogue that we're having right now, you and I. A lot more people are attuned to it nowadays, I think, than it would be back in 2010. Do you see any kind of shift in consciousness happening? Let's call it. Yeah, it's been 5 years since I've seen you. Can you clarify? Can you confirm to us any kind of shift in consciousness happening globally?
Absolutely, there definitely is a huge shift in consciousness, and there's a lot of resistance to it as well. And as it grows and as people grow, the resistance seems to increase. I don't usually go into politics when it comes down to it, but I'd like to just point out something that was recently said, and this is regardless of what any of the listeners' political or religious views may be. President Obama made a point that we should not get on our high horse about Islam and what Islam is doing to strike terror in the world, because we have to realize that in the name of Christianity, the Crusades were running, 1,000 years ago, and enacting great punishment upon people, great murders and bloodshed going on in the name of Jesus. Mm-hmm. And, some people, of course, immediately retorted and said, we're talking about 2015, and the president is going back 1,000 years. You could say that. He was just pointing out that, nobody remains unscathed in this. But then somebody else made a point, not the president, but somebody else made a point about the KKK. And we're not talking about 1,000 years ago with the KKK. We're talking about right now. Because we can look in the newspaper in this, February 2015 and find KKK activity. We can find lynchings going on just in this past decade that were done in the name of white supremacy in the name of Jesus, for example. Sure. These are things that happen to this day. You can talk about the controversies in police brutality and unfair justice for minorities, and that's been greatly in the news. A lot of this is done and pronounced in the name of Christianity. That doesn't condemn Christians, but it's just to let people know there are people by any label misusing these labels and these titles, Islam, Christianity, et cetera, for their own devious uses. Because, again, they live in fear, and it's not to condemn them, because I don't go around condemning anybody, but it's to let them know that there has been a misuse of many different labels, not just Islam. So we can't find ourselves to be self-righteous and say, oh, we're a Christian nation, and look at those Muslims and the terror that they strike upon people. While in the meantime, there's plenty of terror being struck right now in the name of Christianity as well. But we're shielded from a lot of it in our media. And it creates this ego of superiority, in our Christianness versus the rest of the world. And it really creates an imbalance within ourselves, because no matter whether you think too much or too little of yourself, you're imbalanced. And we can't really get imbalanced as a society by thinking so much of ourselves that we have to defeat the great and evil power, called Islam. And then I can't help but remember one incident that happened shortly after the tragedy at the World Trade Center, when there was a man who happened to be a Sikh He followed the Sikh religion, and he wore his turban and, had, dot on his head and beard, and he was attacked brutally. And what people did not realize in their ignorance is that they were attacking somebody of the Sikh religion, first of all, who had nothing to do with Islam. So even if you were right in saying you're so-called attacking the enemy, you don't know who the enemy is, because he was not Muslim. And that just exemplified the danger. It wouldn't have been any better if he was Muslim. That doesn't mean that he was a terrorist. But just the fact that it was so blatantly wrong, and the fact that they even misidentified those who they thought they were doing a justice by. And it let us know we can't jump to conclusions.
Yeah, the information you just shared with us in the last few minutes, Adeeb, there's been a lot of people that know this now. It's even know that part of it. And I think there's a consciousness happening as to what's going on behind the scenes. And people don't necessarily have to be ultra spiritual to know this. And I know people who are not, ultra spiritual, and for some reason they know exactly what you're talking about. So I think part of the conscious awakening is also this unveiling, this revealing of what's going on behind the scenes. The way you're saying it here with us on the radio, where 5-10 years ago it would be more of an underground almost type of thing. And today I can almost talk to someone on the sidewalk, and we can discuss this information that you're bringing through in the last few minutes.
Right,
you know what I
right,
mean?
very true. And I look at it in the mainstream, and speaking of underground, a lot of people will resist that which is mainstream, and it's there are different layers to this. I let people know. I remind them rather, because they know, but a lot of times they don't want to remember this. But there's different layers. I mean, Oprah Winfrey is one of the most powerful people in the world in terms of her influence. She is likely the richest woman in America. And in that respect, or one of them definitely, and in that respect, she has a lot of influence. And her making many shifts into open spiritual discussions over this past decade, even what she's done over the past 5 years, since we were focusing on these past 5 years, has really opened up a lot of people to look at things they never would have looked at before. I know there's not a lot of, I know there are plenty of people who are not Oprah fans out there and say, oh, well, yeah, she's just coming onto this Johnny come lately. It doesn't matter. The point is that she brings the awareness so that other things can be explored, because without it, a lot of people who were in the mainstream would not realize the levels and layers of spirituality that they could experience and they could investigate if it were not for people like her and many others who kind of just bring light to these formerly untouched subjects. And that goes for others like Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer and many others. I thank all of them, and definitely give thanks to all of them, because without them, a lot of people who would have never looked at certain things would never have looked. Right. And that goes for the same as when I started with the 5%ers, or Nation of Gods and Earth with the 5%ers. I mean, you see Jay-Z wearing a flag pendant that is the universal flag of the 5%ers. And people start to have a debate. Is he a member of them, or is he not? Is he just wearing it as a fashion statement? Is he official or not? And all this is outside the point of he's bringing positive recognition to this. He's bringing positive recognition, because a lot of people look at 5%ers now that would have never looked before. So just be thankful for the positive recognition. And whether you're a a new thought teacher, and you have to go and give people the in-depth story of what New Thought really is once they get there, or whether people are, you're a 5%er, and when people get to you because they had saw Jay-Z wear the flag, and you have to straighten them out, so to speak, then straighten them out. When they get to you. But point is that he pointed them in your direction. Now you do the work.
Yeah.
So there's layers to this, and we have to respect those things. Energy's moving constantly.
Yeah, I get a great I get a beautiful picture in my head as you speak. It's pretty amazing what's happening right now on the planet on all levels.
There's absolutely an awakening going on all levels, and the key now as we grow, and some people are growing, in New Thought as religious science or science of mind. Some people are growing and going in the direction of unity. Some people are discovering different avenues of Islam and Sufism, and becoming 5%ers and becoming New Thought Christians and all types of things that they would not have done before. But whatever the label may be, we have to realize that your awakening may not look like mine. Mine may not look like yours. But then our backgrounds are not exactly the same either. But we have to learn to respect one another. The Quran says something like that. I made you into different nations so that you may respect one another and that you may recognize one another. And we have to realize that's powerful in its own respect, because we have to look for the common denominator amongst each and every one of us and realize we're not each other's enemies. Really, there is no enemy, but certainly we're not each other's enemies. But we spend our time fighting, and those who are still in the fear mode, who seek to manipulate because of our infighting, we're not growing, and we put ourselves in their wake, and then we wonder why we're not moving as fast as we'd like or moving as completely as we'd like to do. But we've got to get over putting ourselves in fear's way. Jesus is quoted as saying, what was his quote? Resist not evil. And he said that because when you come to an understanding, you realize there is no evil. There's only levels of understanding, and what we're calling evil is really falling into a pattern of being under the influence of that which we do not desire for ourselves. And we do that by taking our focus off of what we want and allowing what we don't want to rule our lives.
Very true. That's very true. Once we realize that evil is, we put a into it, we make it so real. We can realize that we're doing that to ourselves. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you have those situations where you feel, and I know I've done it to myself. When I was a young student and really teaching hard about the government and what the government has done, I was a political science major, and I taught hard on what the political system of the United States had done to minorities and what they've even done to poor white people, and what they've done to the masses of people in general, and the deception that they've pulled. And I went deep in. I mean, if anybody was going deep in, I was. And we've got to fight the powers that be. I mean, that was the attitude, along with the song, right around the same time. Right around the same time, Fight the Power was out. I was a recent grad leading the revolutionary way toward fighting the system. But I realized the more that I fought the system, even though I was a law-abiding citizen, even though I kept my nose clean, I worked, I was a family man, I didn't smoke, drink, party, didn't do any of that. So why are the cops so interested in me now? Well, the police were interested in me because I was interested in them. My consciousness created an enemy. And people could say, but they were already the enemy. Okay, you could say that. On the surface, it looked like that. But the more I focused my attention on their being an enemy, the more enemy they became. Suddenly I found myself being locked up and faced with gunpoint as many times as I could think. I hadn't robbed anybody. I hadn't stolen anything from anybody. I haven't committed any crimes. But yet, I had created an enemy for myself. So as my spiritual awakening continued, I started to realize I'm putting my attention on that, and it's growing in my life. If I put my attention on oneness, if I put my attention on what I desire, which was love, peace, and happiness, if I put my attention on helping my community instead of helping them protect against this enemy, then I'd receive the same results I want without creating an enemy. Because all I wanted was love, peace, and happiness for myself and those people in my community. And as I focused more upon that love, peace, and happiness and less against the enemy, I started to get better results for my community and myself. The police were no longer interested in me. And, physically, let's face it. Here's this black man, who, is growing his hair out, and now he's got these dreadlocks. I should be more ominous than I was previously when I was young and short haircut and clean shaven. But I became less ominous just by my own thinking.
What a great example. I'm sorry to interrupt, but what a great example of how, we manifest, this reality within ourselves, and how your physical reality changed, your outside world. You know what I mean? You were getting results with your community. The police weren't bothering you any longer, and it was just because you had shifted your perception into something that's more that's true. What a great example!
Right, absolutely. It was a reality that had to really sink into me. I started doing it, and yes, I was doing it consciously, but I had to look back, not many years ago, and say, "Wow, look at the shift, and how much changed in my physical reality based upon my thinking." And the correlation was direct; it was exact.
That's the creator.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, it's not going to change automatically because it didn't get there automatically. So what happens is that resist not evil thing came in. I remember I was illegally and forcibly removed from a house that I was renting. Illegal eviction. Now, the court found it to be illegal eviction. Even the sheriff's department found it to be illegal eviction. However, the way things work, you don't have a whole lot of money. The landlord cried a poor story about, well, I've already renovated the place. They can't get back in there. There's nowhere for them to stay. The result was still the same, homelessness, because of that illegal eviction. And the most I got in compensation by order of the sheriff's department of Dutchess County, New York was, oh, well, give him a night in a hotel. So I got one night in a hotel in compensation for losing my residence. But instead of having the attitude of, this is the enemy, even though I knew he had disdain for me, even though I know that because, and this is what he told me, because of who I was and the color of my skin, that he was doing this to me. I refused to focus my attention on combating him because I'd rather look at myself in love. And I'll be honest, I wasn't quite at the point of looking at him with love yet, but I didn't look at him with hatred either. I focused on the love element and focused on myself and my family. And I did not spend a day in danger. Some people actually came to my rescue, who were at my job at the time, and I didn't spend a night outside for a month. And when I did spend a night outside a month later, it was because I chose to spend some time out in a tent, and it was more convenient. I was appreciative of the time that I was able to spend inside of the shelter that they gave me. But at the time when that ran out, I was able to stay outside in a very beautiful setting in a tent. And before it got cold again, I found a place. But everything was manifesting for me. I actually manifested a place. I actually manifested a car, actually 2 cars before it was all over. It was amazing. I went from living in a tent with no belongings to living in a beautiful home with 2 cars within a period of 3 months.
Yeah, that's how
and it was very deliberate. I mean, I want to let people know that I wrote these things down. I wrote down what I wanted. I refused to put my attention on those perceived enemies. I didn't want to perceive them. I wanted to perceive what I wanted. I wanted a nice place. I wanted reliable transportation. It's getting cold out. I know it's going to get cold because it was around September. I said, okay, I'm upstate New York. It's going to get cold pretty quick. I need transportation to get back and forth from work. I was blessed that I had my job. But still, I'm out of doors. I'm in a tent. So I need transportation, and I need shelter, and I need it to be beautiful. And I deliberately focused on this every day. I meditated on it daily. I wrote down my goals daily, and it came rapidly. And I realized then, if I hadn't realized it before, that there's something to this.
Oh, yeah.
There's really something to this. So, I mean, a lot of that is, the impetus for the book that came just, 6 years after that time, because I realized this transformation is real, and I'm living proof.
Yeah, for those who are listening, I was just waiting for me to interject here. For those who are listening, here it is. If you're any type of how, Adeeb has these beautiful examples in his life. It does work. I mean, we have our own examples. My wife, Cabrini, and I, we have our own examples, too, with our tour. And that's just a drop in the bucket as to what's happening. It does work. It's if you're having, it's cliche as it sounds. When you apply faith to the unknown, when you make the unknown love, things happen in a positive way in your life. You can withstand things that you wouldn't earlier in your earlier parts of in your earlier way of thinking. You apply a lot of wisdom there when instead of getting back at people, you turn on to love and within yourself firstly. I think you probably went through a lot to acquire that wisdom just to get to that point.
It was quite a journey, and it was difficult. I won't lie to anybody. It's difficult to make that shift because your mentality is to react to what you see. Right. It's kind of like if you saw a car coming, you get out the way. So if you see what you perceive to be an attack, then you actually want to do what you would do if a car was coming at you. You want to get back at it somehow. But I'll take somebody to, and movies are very interesting in how they do it. This principle, believe it or not, and some people know this, but other people haven't realized it, is in the Star Wars series. The Way of the Jedi. And when I first saw Star Wars, I knew nothing about this stuff, and I thought it was really cool. But it was just, a great movie and a great movie series. But realize that if you fed in, realize that Anakin actually fed into the dark side. And because he fed in and he fought, with anger in his heart, it turned him to the dark side. And that affected not only his mind, but it affected his physical as well. That there's a direct correlation to what happened to him physically, to disfigure him, and what happened with his mindset. It was a direct correlation. And I look at it now and realize, wow, that's what I wasn't recognizing back then when it came out. And on the other hand, you have Obi-Wan, who basically sacrifices himself. If you look at the battle on the lightsabers, he sacrifices himself and seemingly dies out, but really, the energy that is him, empowers other people because he refused to strike down in anger his enemy. It's a lot to swallow for people. And speaking about Black History Month, since we're in Black History Month, we weren't speaking about it, but I am now. With Black History Month, I think of Dr. Martin Luther King and how he was inspired by Gandhi's nonviolence as well. And just something that I really did not appreciate growing up. I really didn't have a lot of appreciation for Dr. King, not because I was just an ingrate, but more so I looked for action. I mean, I was more of a Malcolm X fan. I'm an Elijah Muhammad fan. I'm a Allah fan, from the founder of the 5%. I mean, that was more so my flavor. I thought that King was passive. And not until I understood what he was doing did I really begin to appreciate, what he was doing and how powerful what he was doing was. It seemed like, turn the other cheek, what's that? And, realizing that, there's only one power in the universe. There's only one force. And if we begin to react as though there's two forces, we're weakening ourselves.
Absolutely.
So he refused to weaken himself. And had he tried to do what other movements did, that would have caused a problem. I mean, looking at Gandhi, I'm going to take it back to that which he was inspired by, how he changed the entire course of a country and led them to independence, through nonviolence. That was amazing. I mean, their noncompliance, yet peaceful, but noncompliant, led the British Empire to have no choice but to let them go. They became a liability.
Once we think there are two powers, you step into a fictitious matrix. I mean, it's just not real. Once we start realizing there's only one power, and then you tap into the truth and you feel it through your whole body. I have Cabrini here on the line with us, Adeeb. She wants to say hello as we close our show, okay?
Okay.
Hey, much love and many blessings, Spirit. Adeeb, we love you, and we are so blessed to have you with us here this evening. I've really resonated with each and every word that you've spoken today, and I just want to commend your commitment and dedication that you move through in love. And one of the things I just want to comment quickly on was the fact about intention and how intention is, when you have the intention of love, it really is the vehicle that brings all those experiences in your life that you desire and create and want for yourself. So I know really quickly, I don't even know if you're aware of this, Adeeb, but while we were traveling, we had completely abandoned ourselves. And we had the opportunity to interview Adeeb in Savannah, Georgia, and he had spent quality, wondrous times with us, sharing his insights of oneness. And we were moving on to Florida. And we had absolutely not one dime in our pocket. And we stood there and we went within and we said, Spirit will provide. And I remember Adeeb, and this was something that, we didn't say, Adeeb, we need money. We don't know how this is going to happen. With that, Adeeb reached into his pocket and said, all I have is $15 here. I want to give this to you for your travels. And see, that is how universal love works. It's not that you have to go out on a mountaintop and scream what you need. right within you, if you meet the spirit that you are, that is love, it provides for everything in your life. So in that regard, I want to really personally thank you for listening, because that $15 got us to our next step, and it got us to our next place that we needed to go. And we really know that, the infinite spirit of love, living, omnipresent, vibrational energy that each of us are, is here now in this very moment with all of us. And we really encourage individuals that are listening to our show to really listen to what's speaking within you that speaks love. God bless, God bless, God bless. Thank you so much, Adeeb. We love you.
You are so welcome. Love you too, Cabrini, and love you both. You've been wonderful, inspiring people to me.
Oh, that's so great to hear, because you're likewise inspiring to us. So the universal energy is very prevalent, with our connection. Absolutely, brother. I'm going to bid you farewell. Thank you so much for being on our show. We'd love to have you on our show again. Can you just mention your websites where people can get a hold of you, and then we can break the show after that.
Sure, absolutely. You can get in touch with me, we can get in touch with the Hip Hop U Multimedia Magazine at www.hiphopu.me. That's hiphop, the letter U.me. If you are interested in getting your books published, I am a publisher, and you can check out our packages and contact me at www.provenpublishing.com. And that is in any genre, by the way, so it does not have to be spiritual. You could have some poetry, fiction. We'll talk. So definitely want to make your dreams come true, because that in itself is spiritual. Make those visions manifest. And also, we have a great line of work at supremedesignpublishing.com for those who want to just check out some books, especially during Black History Month. We have a great lineup of Black history. And let me not leave out my blog, which is whatifgod.net. That is www.whatifgod.net. So any of those places you can definitely get to me. Look me up on Facebook, Adeeb Shabazz, that's AdeebShabazz, and also on Twitter.
Thank you so much, Adeeb, and much love in your continued journey. And we look forward to your expansion and the expansion of consciousness within all beings. Have a great night, everybody. God bless.
Good night.